How do everybody? So, for those of you who are quite familiar with the channel, I'm probably going to sound like a broken record here in what I'm about to say, but it's something that I think will come as absolutely no surprise to anybody either, especially with this article that we're about to read about. And basically, the British state does appear to hate the indigenous population of these islands, especially when you take into account the sort of things that they've been allowing to happen to the people of these islands over the past few decades. I won't go into anything specific, but I think you're going to get where I'm going with this report. So anyway, just recently, GB News had a Home Office report leaked to them. And what it basically said was anybody who is upset about hundreds of thousands of young girls being preyed upon by men of a foreign heritage background, anybody who's concerned about that is far right. And anybody who's concerned about mass immigration into Europe is also far right. That's the basic gist of it, but we're going to get into it now. And basically, the Home Office really, really do seem to be, for lack of a better word, enemies of the state or of the people of Britain at this point. I do realise that's a strong word. I can't think of anything better at this point, but when they are considering that British people who are concerned about the safety of the people of these islands as being extremists and as far right, I can't help but feel that they do appear to be an occupying force as opposed to servants of the people of this land. That is the only way I can view it as somebody who's a veteran as well and has served the country. That is how I view that sort of behaviour. I could never ever imagine when I was wearing the uniform as a soldier ever considering something like that. Ever considering people being far right for being concerned about serious crimes being committed against the people of this country. I'm just absolutely flabbergasted. Absolutely flabbergasted. But anyway, let's get into it. I'll put the link below, so please do read the article yourself. Make your own mind up as well. Just listen to what I'm saying. So anyway, let's get into the article right now. GB News forces Labour to distance itself from official report dismissing immigration concerns as right-wing extremism. Always with the right wing, isn't it? Always with the right wing. Just like when people were out protesting after the Southport massacre. Now, don't get me wrong. There were some absolute idiots out then. But for the government, as particularly the Prime Minister, to label every single one of those people that was out on the streets as far right, insane, absolutely insane. But then they had every single mealy-mouthed word for people of different communities who were going out with swords and knives and were actually attacking people. So when it was people of non-British heritage going out and engaged in violence, well, they were just defending their communities. But when the indigenous people of England were going out and protesting about a bunch of girls being murdered and slashed up, those people were right-wing extremists. So, let's never forget that that's how they view the people of these islands. There is definitely, and I'm not saying this within the communities themselves, but within the actual apparatus, especially the higher echelons, there is definitely an us and them mentality going on between the different communities of these islands. And they make it abundantly clear if you're willing to listen to what they say and observe them and allow them to express themselves and just observe it. Just observe what they're saying and listen to it objectively. Anyway, let's get into this. GB News has forced Labour to that's crazy, by the way, that GB News have actually had to basically browbeat Labour to distance themselves from this report. That this should have been them voluntarily going and saying, "Oh, this is absolutely shocking." This should have been saying this in Prime Minister's questions and during dispatches and stuff. When they're all in Parliament during the day, the news have actually had to go in and basically shame them into admitting that being concerned about girls being raped on an industrial scale isn't actually an extreme point of view, and being concerned about people being worried about that is the extreme point of view. Let's be honest about that. The extremists here are the people in the Home Office for creating this report and labelling anybody who's concerned about industrial scale rape of young girls as being extremists. Those people themselves are the extremists. It's absolutely insane, this. So anyway, Labour to disavow a Home Office report labelling concerns around mass migration and grooming gangs as right-wing extremism. Don't believe your lying eyes, guys. Ignore your lying eyes. It's not really happening. All those hundreds of thousands of girls who are being raped and drugged and beaten and branded and pimped and murdered, and one girl suspected of actually being turned into kebab meat in Blackpool. I'm genuinely not making that up. That is Lancashire Constabulary's leading view on what happened to that girl in Blackpool. I've done a video on that as well, by the way. And Lancashire Constabulary cocked that case up in court. So the two main suspects actually walked away with £250,000 each, just to make people aware of that, by the way. You know, but people being concerned about all of this. Apparently, we're right-wing extremists. You know, insane. Oh, and we're right-wing extremists for being concerned that the parents, when reporting these crimes, were also getting arrested and branded as racists as well, and trying to stir up hatred within communities. Yeah. You know, it's gaslighting. This is actual gaslighting of society. Crazy. Following GB News' expose, a government source told this broadcaster that the paper was not approved by Home Office ministers. Pathetic. That's absolutely pathetic words and embarrassing for him. Well, no, it's not embarrassing because these people are actually shameless. Yvette Cooper, Keir Starmer, all of them in Labour, they're absolutely shameless communists, these people. And they, in my opinion, hate Britain. And they want to see Britain wiped off the face of the earth for various perceived historical crimes against the global people, because they want to usher in the socialist utopia. And only by doing that is the only way they can do that is by destroying national identity and what unifies us as people. It's exactly what Stalin and Lenin did in the Soviet Union. If you actually study Soviet history, you'll find that mass immigration was a huge part of the Soviet Union. They were constantly moving people all around the Soviet Union, and it was to try and destroy national identities so that people weren't connected with the land, to make them easier to control and to rule. Because if you've been moved 6,000 miles away from where you used to live, you're not going to know what the customs, values and traditions are there. You're not going to know what's normal for rules. So they can bring in any old rules that they want in that area, because you're going to be like, well, this must be normal. This must be normal, because you've no connection with the area or with the communities that live there. That's what these people are, communists. It's why they're going after the farmers as well, by the way. That's exactly what the communists did as well. It's what Mao did, and it's what Stalin did, and it's what Pol Pot did. Go after the farmers and destroy them. And you know, by the way, that leads to starvation, and it leads to cannibalism. Yeah, I'm being serious. Starvation and cannibalism. That's what happens when these socialists go after farmers. The idiots. They are absolutely historically illiterate. Fools. The report, which was leaked to GB News, gave an overview on extremism in Britain and was written by civil servants in the Home Office. Well, every single one of them should be sacked for treason, in my opinion, with that. They should be sacked. The paper claimed that grooming gangs are used as a grievance narrative by right-wing extremists. Yeah, guys. So, you know, little girls getting raped and drugged and pimped and branded and murdered and passed around the brothers and trafficked halfway across the country to go meet some cousins. Yeah. That's just a grievance narrative when you're talking about that to people, when you're getting upset about it. You're just using it to promote your own grievances. It's not because you're actually disgusted by that behaviour and you think it's got absolutely zero place in a civilised society. No. No, you're just a right-wing bigot. You're just a right-wing fascist bigot for being concerned about that. And don't you forget it, pleb. Get back in your box, watch your football, eat your fish and chips, and be grateful that we let you do that before we tax you into oblivion from being able to do that as well. That is what this is. This is hubris of the highest order. These people are sycophants. They are more concerned about their own ideological view of the world and making it come together than they are about actually having society functioning. They will literally allow children to be raped on an industrial scale and cover it up if it means that they can carry on with their pet project of their own political mindset. These people are dangerous. Very, very dangerous people. It's also labelled the belief that Western culture is under threat from mass migration as an extremist view. Well, Western culture is under threat from mass migration, as we've recently seen happening in Wales, where they are actually considering stopping people from walking dogs, where people have walked dogs since the times of the Romans. There are actually reports from when the Roman invasion happened of the Britons using war dogs in these islands. That's how long dogs have been here. Dogs have been on these islands for at least 6,000 years. Dogs and walking them through the hills and mountains is as much a part of Britain as Stonehenge. That is how old this is. And we are being told that we have to stop doing that in our own lands that our ancestors created. There's a word for that. It's called colonisation. That is what that is. Colonisation, that is what is happening. The Welsh government have actually said that Welsh people are going to have to give up their own culture to accommodate foreigners. I'm genuinely not making that up. This is the sort of mindset these people have. They are trying to erase British people. That is not an opinion. That is an observable fact as far as I'm concerned. You can actually see it happening. They actually say those words. This is their own words, what they are using. They are expressing this. And try and say that it's just some sort of extremist view when they are saying that's what they're going to do in order to accommodate migrants. Welsh people have to give up their culture for migrants. Well, you explain to me how that is not Western culture being put under threat by mass migration. Please explain that to me like I'm an idiot, because I don't think I'm ever going to be able to understand how that isn't Western culture being under threat from mass migration, I'm afraid. I don't think there's... We could spend the next million years trying to explain that to me, and I'm afraid I'll never accept it. I don't think it's actually possible to try and convince me otherwise in that, I'm afraid. The Research, Information and Communications Unit, RICU memo, warned right-wing extremist narratives, particularly around immigration and policing, are in some cases leaking into mainstream debates. That's just called public debate. These people are actually concerned that the public are noticing that this pet project going back to Tony Blair of mass immigration and multiculturalism isn't working out. And oh no, the plebs have noticed. Oh, how do we put a lid on this now? How do we get the sheep back in the pen and back to sleep? That's what this is. They're concerned that they've lost control of the narrative and that people can actually now see what's happening. These people are dangerous. They're deranged. But that is no surprise because these people are communists. The communists are insane. Like, there's literally no pile of bodies high enough that they are willing to create to reach utopia. 60 million people died in China from the communist revolution. 30 million alone starved to death after Chairman Mao decided to bring in agricultural reforms, where they were going out banging pots and pans 24 hours a day so that starlings and sparrows couldn't rest because they were stealing the grain off the plants. Well, guess what happened? They had a mass famine the year after because all those little birds weren't going out eating things like locusts. So they had a plague of insects ravaged the country, destroyed all the crops, and people were starved. 30 million people starved to death. Because these people think they can micromanage the world. They're actually insane. They are deluded. They think they are God. And that's the problem with them. They actually think they have the power of God. Dangerous, dangerous people suffering seriously from hubris. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman told GB News this humiliating climb down shows how out of touch Labour are on immigration. Well, you know what, Suella Braverman, that's all well and good saying that, but your party created more immigration than basically the previous 1,000 years before. So I'm afraid, as far as the Conservatives go, they're just as bad as Labour. In fact, they're worse because they just continued it and then put it on steroids. The two cheeks are the same arse, them two parties. No actual difference. They're willing to say what needs to be said, but when it comes down to it, when it comes down to brass tacks, they ain't going to do what needs to be done. Cowards, because they're more concerned about sorting themselves out for a job when they leave, so they'll do as they're told. They'll say everything. They'll give all the words that people want to hear. They call it throwing out red meat for the masses. Throw out red meat. Throw the red meat out. But then when it comes to actual voting day, when it matters, they won't do it. They'll do what the paymasters tell them to do because they have no morals. Moralless. And Labour, well, they're just out-and-out communists, aren't they? So they're basically the same. Communists and the useful idiots. That's what those two parties are. Communists and the useful idiots. Millions of British people worry about what is happening in their country under Labour. They don't want to see the fabric of their society changed by mass migration. Well, it's not just under Labour, it was under the Tories as well, because your party is just as guilty as them, as I've just said. To paint them as racists and conspiracy theorists is reprehensible, 100% agree with you there. To trivialise the industrial-scale rape of young women is outrageous, and the attempt to coerce public opinion through censoring social media is beyond disgraceful. Well, they're going to be going out giving people knocks on the door for non-crime hate incidences as well. I mean, I'm basically come to the mind, I don't care anymore. You know, the police can come around my house as many times as they want and they can interview me as many times as they want. I couldn't care less anymore, genuinely. And I think most people are getting that way. Like, could not care less about what people think of me anymore. Call me any name under the sun. I'd water off a duck's back now. I'm just sick of what is happening to the country that my ancestors built. And I've aided in forwarding myself with my own two hands, with working through the military and on the railway, doing maintenance and repairs of the infrastructure. that I've in some way, in a small, infinitesimally small way, have contributed to myself to try and leave the country in a better state than I found it. And these people are wrecking it. They're happy to trash it all to line their own pockets so they can go get jobs in Facebook or go working for some environmental green windmill company or some crap like that. They are literally willing to destroy the country for that. Infuriating. Treasonous. She added, the embarrassing retraction of this document brings to light Labour's duplicity on immigration. Well, you know what? At least they're backtracking on it. Tories never backtracked on it at all. They just put it on steroids, didn't they, mass immigration? They didn't do anything. They just carried on with it regardless. I'd like to thank GB News for their hard work exposing this matter and ensuring the public know what Labour think of the public behind closed doors. Well, it's not behind closed doors. They tell us to our face. Like with the farmers. They're calling farmers greedy landlords, aren't they? Greedy farmers. Like they're driving around in Ferraris and Lamborghinis. Like they literally tell us to our faces what they think of us. Oh, it's like when they say about, what is it? Diversity is our strength. That's them telling you to your face. That means the indigenous population are incapable of doing anything. That's what diversity is our strength means. It means without these people coming in, we are weak and pathetic and we're incapable of building anything. We only built the British Empire. We only created the Industrial Revolution. We only sent rockets to the moon. The Western world only invented the internet and nuclear energy and mass shipping and aeroplanes. But, God forbid that we don't have migrants coming from the third world. Without them, we're nothing. That's what that is telling us. And they repeatedly tell us this. Cultural enrichment, what? Because we don't have our own culture. That's what they're saying with cultural enrichment. We have no culture, so we need to bring people over here to give us culture. They tell us all the time. People just don't listen to what they're saying. They just hear the platitude. They don't hear the actual information that's being said. It's clear that Labour are the party of open borders and will continue to waste money on their hollow words in action on immigration. Yeah, because you allowing in like 3 million people in 1 year, that wasn't open borders, was it? RICU, which was founded in 2007 to tackle extremism and terrorism, authored the report. I mean, again, these subversive organisations like RICU, the Tories had 14 years to get rid of them. All of these quangos that Tony Blair brought in, they could have got rid of them in one fell swoop, and they didn't. In fact, they strengthened them, gave them more powers, and created more of them. Which is why the Tories and Labour are no different. They are no different. All of these problems, the Tories could have fixed like that. They could have taken us out of the European Convention on Human Rights. They could have taken us out of the UN Charter on Refugees. They could have taken us out of all these things. They could have scrapped the Supreme Court. But they didn't do any of that because they haven't got the balls to do it, because they're not interested in doing it. That's why. RICU is based in the Home Office, and its memo sent to ministers last month was criticised by figures across the political divide. Following GB News' reporting, a Labour source told us many of the points RICU makes are completely wrong and do not reflect the views of the government. I doubt that very much, to be honest with you. I think what it is that they've been caught out with this and now they've been forced to backtrack from it. I do not believe that the government actually reject what RICU's saying. I think the government are in full agreement with them because they've actually gone out and said it publicly. Like during the Southport massacre protests. They actually said that all those people were right-wing extremists. They hold those views. They have said those views. In particular, child sexual abuse and grooming are immensely serious crimes which devastate the lives of victims and should always be discussed in the most serious terms and treated in the most serious way. Which is why we are planning to strengthen the law to go after more of those who carry out this appalling abuse. But what about the people who covered it up and hid it? What about, because these crimes mostly happen in Labour areas, by the way, in Labour councils. So what about all the councillors who covered them up? What about all the police chiefs who covered it up? What about the NHS doctors and nurses who covered it up? Or the social care workers who covered it up? Or the school teachers who covered it up? What about all those and anybody else who was involved in the cover-up? They ain't doing none of that, are they? They ain't going after one person who's involved in covering any of this up, are they? No, platitudes. They don't want to do anything about it. That's why, because they don't care. If they cared, they would start holding individuals to account for covering it up, but they won't. For many years, academics and analysts on radicalisation have used phrases like grievance narratives The use of that phrase in this context was clearly wrong, and ministers have instructed officials to ensure there is no repetition of it in future government documents. Well, it's like when the CIA invented the term conspiracy theories to try and delegitimize people who were talking about things that really happened, like the Gulf of Tonkin incident being made up, which got America to go into the Vietnam War, by the way. Anybody who's interested in learning about that, do. Basically, the short version is that a US patrol boat was attacked by Viet Cong troops, got sunk, Americans got dragged into the war. Never happened. Never happened. And various other things. There was quite a lot of things happening around that sort of time of history to do with like the US planning to do terrorist attacks on their own land, and blaming it on Fidel Castro as well. I think Operation Paperclip, I think that was called. No, that was getting the German scientists for after the war. Mockingbird, I think that might have been. Might have been Operation Mockingbird. And there was also MK Ultra as well, where they were literally dosing people with LSD, but like seriously big doses of LSD to try and turn people into Manchurian candidates. So they reckon that Lee Harvey Oswald, the guy who shot John F. Kennedy, they reckoned he was a Manchurian candidate and that he'd been brainwashed. So was Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. He was an MK Ultra victim, and Charles Manson, I believe, was also an MK Ultra victim as well. But again, people they invented the term conspiracy theorist to delegitimize people who were speaking about those things and trying to expose them. The source continued, on other issues raised, the government has said many times that it shares the very legitimate concerns people across the country have on immigration and smallpox crossings. My goodness, I can smell the BS from here with that statement. My God, I think those people need to go brush their teeth because they've still got, I think, Winnets and tag nuts stuck in the mouth from the amount of poo they've been sucking straight from the bull's backside. This is why we recently announced an additional 150 million of investment in border security and have committed to cut net migration from record levels under the Tories. Don't believe it. Keeping the public safe is the first duty of any government, and we take the threat from violent extremism very seriously. Well, is that why they won't deport some of the most serious criminals? A man in Scotland sexually abused his stepdaughter, can't be deported back to Ghana because, get this, it'll interfere with his private life, his private right to a family life. You can't make that up, can you? Sexually assaulted. I can't remember the exact words. I don't think he used his downstairs member, but I think it was fingers going into places where they shouldn't have gone. Is my understanding. Can't be deported. Can't be deported because it'll interfere with his private family life. That is the definition of anarcho tyranny right there. Like you say something the government don't like, you go into prison for mean words. You molest a child and you got brown skin, can't deport you, pal. Can't deport you because your human rights. That is actual anarcho tyranny. It's insane. The country is actually insane at this moment. The majority of this threat is from Islamist extremism, followed by far-right extremism and other violent fixations with growing threats and radicalisation among teenagers. Now, going off, this is pulling it from the top of my head, so these numbers aren't exact, but if memory serves me correctly, the percentages for the threats of these different things is that Islamic extremism is somewhere in the region of about 80% of the threat. Far-right extremism is less than 5% of the threat. So these things are not comparable. They are absolutely, especially when you look at the population size differences as well. These differences are just complete hogswash to try and compare them and to try and make out like there's a big, massive far-right threat which just does not exist. They want it to exist. They really, really do want it to exist, but it doesn't. And it's a red herring that they keep trying to throw out as an excuse because they are more concerned about their own political narrative, like I was saying earlier, that they are willing to gaslight the public and lie about it. Robert Bates, the founder for the Centre of Migration Control, said, "This is a significant victory for GB News and ordinary voters across the country." I don't think it is. It's a morale victory. It's a vocal victory, but it's not going to change anything. These people aren't going to change their opinions. Yeah, the report might go in the bin, but these people are still going to carry on holding those opinions in their hearts and their heads. And they'll carry on working, and they'll find ways to work around it by not having that report. There is always a workaround. That report was just trying to rubber stamp what they're already doing. That's all that was. It was a rubber stamp exercise. The Home Office is so inundated with left-wing activists masquerading as civil servants that the department is now going AWOL and attempting to dictate government policy. Well, that's been happening for a long time, I'm afraid. And again, that was down to Tony Blair taking away powers from ministers. Concerns about migration and the national ship. With that, by the way, the only person who can actually tell civil servants what to do is the Prime Minister. All these other government ministers actually have no authority to tell them what to do. And that is, it's crazy. So when you see like the education for, I don't know, health, talking about the NHS and people saying, why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? Is because that person can't actually make the NHS do anything. As much as they want to, the NHS can just go, yeah, cheers, love. See you later. Not interested. They have no authority or power over the departments that they run at all. It's the senior civil servants that have all the power, and only the Prime Minister can veto them. Crazy that, and you can thank Tony Blair for that one. He added, there must be a full investigation into how civil servants working on terrorism and extremism policy could label ordinary worries that millions of British people hold as extremist. By labelling them as such while advising the government on terrorism and extremism policy, these civil servants were attempting to shut down legitimate debate of their political opponents. People need to be fired for this. Well, in my opinion, people need to be put against the wall and fired. In my perfect world, this level of treason, and I do believe that is treason, what these people have committed with that report, I believe should be punishable up to and including firing squad. No option for a blindfold either. You will watch as they've raised their rifles. These people get no sympathy from me. Now, obviously, that isn't legal or lawful, so it will not happen, but I do think laws need changing. And with that, actually, once I've finished recording this, I'm going to create a petition because the petitions page is reopened on Parliament, on the parliamentary page. I'm going to create a petition to bring back the death penalty. I doubt that it'll happen, but you know what? This is how you get these things moving. You get people talking about it. So I'll put a link below for that as well. So please do, if you're in the United Kingdom, sign that petition and share it far and wide. And we will start making our voices heard in Parliament one way or another. These people will start doing as the people of this country want. Thank you very much for your time. As I say, I'll put that link below for the petition that I'll create and for this story. Please do read it yourself. Make your own mind up. Don't just go off what I say, you know. And if you agree with me or not, please do put a comment below. I'm not a closed book. I will change my opinion if you're arguing and whatever your points are strong enough. I don't want to change my mind on this, so I'll be honest with you. But please do, if you've got strong enough arguments. I could be missing vital information, so please do put it down there. You know, do like and subscribe. Thank you very much for your time. Take care and goodbye.